Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, and you're listening to Get In. Yeah, what does it mean? It means to get in an important conversations about the body and life. I'm the founder of the NIA Technique, an international and global movement art that is dedicated to holistic living. Basically, feeling good in your body and being responsible, proactive in developing a relationship with your body and life so that you can make a difference in your life and hopefully in the lives of those around you. Our topic today is something that I am so passionate about: healing. Healing. And healing the world through what? Race literacy. Now, I know there's been a lot of chit chat about that topic, but not like you're going to hear the conversation go today with my guest today, Milagros Phillips. Let me tell you a little bit about Milagros. Now, I met Milagros when I was researching and I was looking to actually find leadership. And I was looking for the real deal. I wasn't looking for leadership with a bunch of initials behind somebody's name who is educated in something, but somebody who is educated, who has walked the talk, who has lived the life. I was drawn to Milagros because she's a visionary, absolutely extraordinary. And she is also a leader. She's a woman. She's an artist and she's a healer. That's a lot rolled up into one, and that's what gets me excited. And we chatted, and she agreed to help me during that time and to help the NIA organization. And we set out to do some education, and it was paid by the NIA Technique, free to everybody. And I was kind of disappointed in the level of interest in the program. And again, it didn't really matter to me. What mattered was I was stepping my toes in something that I was completely ignorant about. I was reaching out to somebody to teach me because it is my company and I'm responsible for the education I bring. And I pride myself on somatic education, body and life education. So this was timely, necessary, and something that I did not have in my window view at all. Now, Forbes named Milagros one of today's innovative leaders, and I love innovation. She has worked on consulting, designing, and facilitating. Here's the word that I loved: strategic race literacy, strategic, and race healing programs to enhance diversity, equity, inclusion in many industries. Now, if you've been listening to the news, you know everybody jumped on after the murder of George Floyd. Everybody jumped on that bandwagon. Oh my gosh, we need that. And then lately, it's kind of trickled off. Why? Is the need any less? I don't think so. Is our interest not in it because it's not right in our face? Maybe. We're going to talk about that. Affectionately, I love this, affectionately known as the race healer. Don't you love that? And this is what sets, in my mind, Milagros way apart from other DEI leaders. And also, what sets her apart is that she is a multi talented multimedia artist, body and life artist, a Reiki master and teacher, a sound therapist, a teacher of Course in Miracles, beautiful, beautiful, and creator of Race Demystified. I love that. Race Demystified, to healing from racial conditioning. Racial conditioning. Yep. I hadn't even thought about it. I know a lot about muscle conditioning. This was new to me. And healing from racism. I didn't know that there was pain in me like I discovered the pain. I didn't know, well, I shouldn't say that. I did know there was pain. Growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, trust me, I saw pain. I saw racial injustice. But I didn't know the pain was so deep and so visceral, and that it was something that permeated through humanity. It still is. It's still painful. And Milagros has been working with this and inspiring action for over 35 years. Okay. So this isn't just something, oh, wow, new. I think I'll do this. She's an AA keynote speaker, a TED Talk presenter. Don't we love it? You can hear her. Award winning author of 5 titles, certified coach, recipient of the 2021 New Thought Walden Award for Interfaith and Intercultural, get this, understanding. Understanding is a big part of what she does, and she does it in such an elegant, no blame, no shame, don't feel guilty kind of way. Beautiful. And I'm so blessed to have found her. And when I read this quote, I went, I have, I found the right person. The Mavis Staines, artistic director and CEO, Canada's National Ballet School, said about her work for a learning session. She gave a learning session. She provided an invaluable history on anti Black racism with global context, race literacy, and the importance of healing. They talked about the fact there were many many learnings alongside a clear call to action. And this is what got me. It is our collective responsibility, here's that word, to understand racism, to heal it, transform it. And I heard that and I sat with that and I went, wow, it is my responsibility. And not for my company, not for the NIA community. It's a responsibility for me as a human being. It has to start with one voice, one idea, one spark, one person that cares. And those who care, well, they'll come close to that heat and close to that fire. Her award winning book, I love it. Cracking the Healer's Code. That's what got me, the word healer in it. A prescription for healing and racism, finding wholeness. Silver medal winner on the Golden Book Awards for politics and social issues. Well, politics and social issues, and now even my NIA business of movement, it seems like they're all tied up into one. Needless to say, she is a woman on a mission. She is one woman stepping toward healing humanity. Are you in with it? Do you want to do it with her? I do. Welcome, Milagros.
Thank you so much, Debbie. I am so excited to be here. I love the NIA community. I love the work that we did together a couple of years ago. It was really powerful. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, I got to tell you, I rarely get nervous
Not
in
for one
having
second.
conversations, and I went, "Oh my god, I'm nervous." And then I went, "What are you nervous about?" And I went, "Okay." I went back to, "I'm gonna say something wrong. I'm gonna say something stupid." So I'm just gonna clarify it that I might right now. I'm gonna do my best not to, but I'll do my best. So why do you think NIA is a global community? So 41 different countries, but why do you think there is such a need, at least in the United States, to become literate about race in America? It's different in other cultures. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so when we're learning our ABCs in school and learning arithmetic, um, we never are taught to be race literate. We are not given enough information for us to make the transformation. And as a result, what happens is that our actions, reactions, and interactions are guided by the little bit of information that we have about race and racism, a lot of which is pretty poisonous. It's all about those people with brown and medium to dark brown skin. There's something wrong with them. That's a lot of what people absorb. And so it goes from and anything from crossing the street when you see a person of color to not hiring people of color in your organization because you don't really know them. You don't know what it's going to be like working next to these folks, or doing it because it's a number as opposed to I'm bringing in immense talent and people who have a plethora of experiences that I may not necessarily have. And so we're bringing in all of this um, power into our organization, and we need to honor that and respect it. So it's a very different way of looking at ourselves. I also remind people that the racism that we experience today and how we experience racism is is it's not the fault of anyone living today, but it is our collective and individual responsibility to heal it and transform it. The
Yeah.
racism that we're experiencing today is over 600 years old and is institutional, systemic, internalized, personal, and interpersonal. And a lot of the work that we want to do is we want to attack racism from the interpersonal perspective. So I want to control what you say. I need for you to be politically correct. I need for you to say the right thing in the right way at the right time. And I need to feel comfortable with what you're saying and doing in order for me to be able to function well. Well, when we are whole and complete, we don't need that much external stimulation. We just don't, you know?
Exactly.
And we can take responsibility for you said something that, from my vantage point, sounds probably very different from the way that you said it. And so I'm receiving it as, whatever that is, right? And being able to name it. I'm receiving it as pain, I'm receiving it as anger, I'm receiving it as trauma. Like really taking responsibility for what your behavior is doing to me rather than my trying to control your behavior so that I can feel safe and cuddled and whatever else. So yeah, so it's a very different way of looking at racial conditioning, which is, I always tell people racism is a condition brought about through hundreds of years of conditioning,
Yeah.
and so we need to just really unpack that, right?
Unpack that past, and yet there are people that would say, "Who cares about, who cares about the past? The only thing that's really important is what's happening now."
Mhm.
Um, I was so deeply touched, um, going into the past. I felt the same way as when I watched these, 3 videos by these Canadian filmmakers. First one was called The Goddess Remembered, and I remember coming out of the movie theater and think, "How did I not get this education?
Mm.
How did this history not be given to me? It's so very important." And I felt the same way when, I was open to the history through you and explored. I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, I was angry at my education for not making that as important as arithmetic. How do
Ab-
you create good human beings if you don't bring them into the past of behavior and action?
And we inherit the past, whether we like it or not, whether we talk about it or not, whether we write it into the books or not. We are all party to our intergenerational and historical trauma, and whatever form that takes and that took for our ancestors, that we're carrying some of that memory in our being. And sometimes, like, you could walk into a room and get triggered by something that someone said, or and you're just like, where's that coming from? I don't even know this person, right?
Yeah,
And so there's so much to us as human beings that it's not just, oh, here I am today. We are a product of the past. We are here because there are those who came before us. Okay, we didn't just drop into the planet. And so we have this history that literally lives and is bred in our bones, right? And so understanding that we carry generational trauma, and that generational trauma affects our actions, reactions, and interactions, whether we're aware of it or not. And certainly, historical trauma is something that affects everyone. And then when we're talking about race specifically, it affects everyone because it doesn't matter what side of the puzzle you're on, it affects everyone, right? So if you're a person of color, it affects you as generational trauma that you inherited from wherever your that just your parents and grandparents and so on, but also where they came from in the world.
Yeah.
Not every black and brown person experienced slavery. Some didn't. And so, a lot of black and brown people experienced colonization. Some didn't, and so, just being aware that we carry this history, the history of women, and what's happened to women, and how the rights of women were institutionalized. Like all of those things play a role in this history, and it's really important. For instance, one of the things that we rarely talk about, um, that continues to affect us today as women, um, are inheritance rights. There was a time that certainly in the European culture, which globally is very much the dominant culture when it comes to leadership
Mhm.
and the taking over of countries and things like that. European women they had no rights. They weren't allowed to inherit. They belonged to someone. Everything that they had um, belonged to the men in the family, their fathers, their brother, the oldest brother, and so on. Women were not allowed to inherit. In fact, if a woman married and she had money that she inherited separately from, a parent who died or who was very intentional in leaving her some wealth, her husband would take that over. And so women were not allowed the right to manage their own wealth for a very long time. Okay. And so how that shows up today is, to this day, women still make less money than men.
Right.
Men are more, you know what I mean? Like men
Yeah.
are considered more valuable in the society than women, even though we're the ones that give birth to the next generation. Okay. And so there is this whole level of history, and also marriage rights, and how those marriage rights were written into European law specifically, and how that affected the colonization of all these countries that were colonized around the world. For instance, marriage rights were only given to two European, male and female, that were married, and therefore their children were considered, particularly the firstborn male, could inherit. Okay. But if that firstborn male child was the child of a European male and an African woman, or a European male and an indigenous woman, that male didn't have the right to inherit and was considered illegitimate, considered to have been born outside of the
Wow.
marriage. Now, how does that affect us today? Take, for instance, Princess Grace's son,
Mhm.
who fell in love with and had a child with an African woman. His child recently turned 18 years old. That boy cannot inherit. He had to marry a white woman, and they got him a white woman from South Africa to marry. They have a set of twins, and they're, I think they're just under teen years. It was they had twins, a boy and a girl. The boy can inherit. His brother, who was born many years before him, still cannot inherit because the laws have not been changed. The laws have not been changed. And so when you look at that, the way that marriage rights were written, that's why we had to rewrite marriage rights. Up until the 1967 was when the Supreme Court in this country struck down the old marriage laws, which
Mhm.
said that you couldn't marry outside of your quote unquote race. And so that meant that if you were married to somebody who was of a different, what they call race, right? Or different hues and different colors, those marriages were not considered legal. This is
Yeah.
1967. Some of us remember 1967, I hate to tell you,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's not that long ago.
Yeah.
And so, so realizing that, and by the way, all of those things were written based on inheritance rights, and they were coded in color. So they were coded around race to make sure that Black and brown people could not inherit the kingdom.
Wow. The word inherited, you talk about what we've inherited as thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors from passed on generational. Um, and then you talk about in inherited in terms of legal, right? The laws that make it possible to get to have something that is rightly yours, a part of yours, just because of where you came from and the disparity of that. And it's 2024, and I'm hearing this, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" It's like it's hard to even it's hard to think that things could have happened 100 years ago, and we think of ourselves as becoming more conscious, we want to become more conscious. I like to think that we could change things like that with the right action, and with enough motivation. Does it have to be so painful for us to be motivated? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, it's such a great question because one of the things that I remind people is how quickly things changed after COVID. When we
Yeah.
want to make change, we can make change really fast.
Yeah.
Just depends on the motivation and who it affects. If it affects us as individuals personally and we're the majority, then we're more likely to do something about that, right? But if it's
Yeah.
those people over there, because we still haven't figured out that those people over there are us.
Yeah.
They're us. And what affects them affects us as well. And so we still haven't figured that one out, okay? And so what happens very often is that people react and interact with one another based on what works for me and
Mhm.
not looking at the bigger picture of what works for us. What works for us, and then being deliberate about making that happen. That's a big shift in consciousness. I was just talking to someone earlier today, and I was talking about the Einstein quote, which I will butcher, I assure you, but it's basically what it says is you can't solve your problems with the same consciousness that created it. Totally paraphrasing that, right? And so when you think about that, and you think about it from the perspective of race, think of all the years of conditioning that have created the consciousness that we carry today. And what it would take to change it is a different consciousness. But you can't get a different consciousness if you think the consciousness that you're walking around with is the perfect consciousness. So
Yeah,
because you're not going to do anything to
that
change.
waking up, that waking up to, "I need to change." Can you share a moment that comes to mind for you personally when you felt like you were walking through the shadow and you had that light, that consciousness moment where you knew, "You know what? I think I'm supposed to do this work." Was there like
Mm.
a moment?
um, Not really. Mostly I was fighting. Like I didn't know obviously what I know now about race, but what I knew was I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Like, my life is difficult enough. I am not doing this work, okay? Like, I'm just not. And so I did all these wonderful things, which were actually really good for me. I mean, hindsight, I realized that my spirit, my essence was bringing me through all these circuitous, um, roads to bring me here, right? And so, so I was, there was this consciousness at some point that the healing was a path for me. Healing mostly because I was trying to heal myself. And I realized that I could help other people as well. And that was really important to me because life has never just been about me. Even as a little child, it's always been a kind of an us thing, right? And so I was having realizations that helped me to, it felt like it was helping me become a better me. And I wanted other people to have that as well, right? So that they could become a better them for themselves. And so I was doing everything and anything not to do race work. Okay. So, teaching the Course in Miracles, I discovered sound and sound therapy, which, I look back and I go, how did I know all that stuff? This we're talking that, early 90s. I was teaching sound therapy. It was just like, one day I woke up and it was like I had all this information about sound. And it was sort of like, I don't know where this came from, except I was a meditator. So clearly I was tapping into something.
Mhm.
And in fact, I had an experience. I was going to do a concert in New Hampshire. And I had done a couple of other concerts before that. And this particular morning, as I was warming up my voice, I started singing in this strange language and crying and just sobbing my eyes out and going, "What is this?" Like, "What
Yeah.
is," And so it was a wonderful experience for me because I studied art, and so I understood color and the impact of that on our vision, on our moods, and all these wonderful things, right? So that was a form of understanding frequency. I also studied to be a singer, and so I had studied to be an opera singer. When I was a child, I wanted to be an opera singer. That was like my big dream in life, right? And so I'm studying frequencies, right? So I'm studying frequencies as both an a visual artist and a performing artist.
Mhm.
And so I'm sort of absorbing all of this information. Fast forward now, I'm this person that goes to sleep one night and wakes up, and it's like I'm hearing sounds, beautiful music, and couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And I went for my walk in the woods and I'm still hearing the music. And I'm like, oh my God, it's inside of me. Like it was just like, so so there was all of that was happening. And I had all this information and this knowledge about sound that I have no idea where it came from, except I knew that I needed to teach this, right? So I started teaching it. Fast forward.
It's it the internal knowing that you talk about that I have no idea, but it's in me. I get it. I have it. I know it. It's truth without going to a library, without, and it's just given to you.
Mhm,
It's given to you. And I believe that that happens when we're open spiritually to be a transmitter of truth. And whether it's with color or sound. And, I can remember having an experience of taking a class and walking out of the class and hearing a voice that said, you're going to create something like this, but without any kind of machines. And I'm like looking around going, are you talking to me? Right. And then it came again, and then it came again. And I have this rule. If I get something three times, it's like, it's for me. You got
mhm.
to pay
Yeah,
attention.
yeah, yeah.
And that moment of trust, internal trust that I don't need any outside validation. I've got this validation and I know that this is what I'm supposed to do. Is that spiritual kind of validation something that you can track, and can you describe it differently as something from the outside, people saying, "Hey, your book's great?"
Mhm. Yeah, no, for me, it's definitely, an internal thing. And so because I had done all of these things and, taken all these, when it came time for me to understand that doing this work specifically was actually the path, I was ready. I was
Ah, you
ready.
were ready.
I
Mhm.
was ready. And so all of these things that were happening were getting me ready. But of course, it had nothing to do with race because I wasn't going to do any race work, you know? It had to do with all these other things that I was going to do that was so much fun, you know? And and I remember being very aware, like I started to do diversity work in organizations. And what I did was I really loved the Course in Miracles. And so what I did was I translated the Course in Miracle into corporate language. So I was able to go into organizations and speak Course in Miracles without using the words, right? And
Yeah.
so so that was an interesting inroad, but even that was too broad.
Mm,
Really, my soul was leading me to do the race work, to be very specific and very intentional. And and I have to say that that was a journey in and of itself because I had to face my own um, racial dysfunction.
mhm,
I had to face my own anger toward white people for their lack of consciousness. I
mhm,
had to face my own frustrations and pain around that, and um, and come through the other side. I remember doing a weekend of silence where all this rage came up. I It was so cute because I thought, oh, since I do all this sound work, I'm going to do a weekend of silence, and it's going to be lovely, you know? Oh yeah.
mhm.
It was all I mean, I had no idea that I had so much rage, and I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't talk about it because it's a weekend of silence. I couldn't process it externally. I had to process it internally. And so, like, toward Sunday afternoon, this peace came over me. But it was because I couldn't hide from the pain of that rage. I had to face that rage. And by
Mhm.
facing that rage, it brought me through the other side where I suddenly realized that not only were like everyone was deserving of my compassion, but
Mhm.
I was deserving of my compassion.
Yeah.
And also realizing that this work was given to me for a reason. Now, mind you, I've had a lot of times where I was just like, "Spirit, what are you thinking?" You know, like, "Come on, like, why me? Why do I have to do this?" You know, it's crummy. Okay, why do I have to tell people they need to wake up? You know, um, but I had to find my way in so that I could present that to people with love rather than blaming and shaming. It was the realization that, wow, I didn't know any of this, right? Now I know it. So my responsibility is not to shame people for not knowing it, but to understand that they too have been misinformed. And those who are misinformed are bound to miscreate. So,
That's beautiful. Those are misinformed are bound to miscreate. Um, you know, I think I've often asked myself, where did your sense of compassion and empathy come from? Is that just natural to you, Debbie, or did was it given to you, taught to you by someone? And I'm going to say my parents for sure. Um, my dad uh, met my mother in London. She was one of the first British war brides to set foot in American soil. And I can remember experiences. My both of my parents were very compassionate people. Not that they didn't have their own experiences of trauma, etc. My dad was Jewish, and I can remember him saying to me, "Don't tell anybody at school that you're Jewish." And I looked at him, and it's like, "Why not?" You know? And I remember him bending down and taking my hands and looking in my eyes and saying, "Some people will be afraid." And I'm like, "Afraid?" "What do you mean afraid?" He said, "Some people will be afraid they don't understand. It's not their fault." And I remember him saying it's not their fault.
Mm.
And then another time was my mother doing almost the same thing. My mother was an artist, fantastic artist. And we had a painting in a living room wall, this beautiful painting of this black woman. And my neighbor was not allowed to come in the house. And I said, "Why not?" She's out on the front step. She says, "Oh, I can't come in the house because you have on the wall in the living." I'm
Mhm.
like, "What?" So
Mhm.
I went to my mom and I said, and it was almost the same kind of thing. She said, "It's okay. They're afraid, and they don't understand." And I never thought I never put the idea of healing together with that moment, but those moments stuck with me as compassion and understanding of people who are afraid is really, really important. And people can be afraid of anything. They'd be afraid of a picture on a wall, for God's sake. They could be afraid of anything. So I was like, "Oh God, what are you afraid of?" Just became a phrase. Did you have did your innate sense of compassion come from your parents?
Yeah, particularly, my father was a very compassionate person. He was also very stern and, like everybody has to get it right kind of thing. Um, my mother had her own way with that, but my mother was always very compassionate. I remember my mother would go to the grocery store and she'd come home with one or two homeless people and she would sit them out in the backyard and bring them food. She was always feeding
Wow.
people. Like she was just always, in fact, it's so funny because I hadn't seen my sister-in-law in a long time. And I was telling her grandchildren, so the great grand, that story about my mother, and my sister-in-law had said, "Yep, she was always bringing homeless people home to feed them," and so there was always this great compassion for people, and she was incredibly generous, just incredibly generous. I remember when we moved to the U.S. I was looking through my father's papers after she passed away. My father made $137 a week. Out of that, of course, you're paying your rent and there's always plenty of food in the house. But I remember my mother putting $10 in an envelope with aluminum foil, okay, and sending it to different people in the Dominican Republic. And she
Wow.
just did that. Yeah, and I thought back about that because she also shared everything she had with, a family or whatever. But this incredible generosity
Yeah.
and kindness, that I got from both my parents, and it has been such a gift for me. In fact, I went for a walk this morning, and I was thinking about the gift of kindness.
Yes.
And how we all have that. You see little children, little babies that are learning to eat real food. The moment you give them the spoon, the first thing they do is try to feed you. That's who we are
Yeah.
as human beings. We're incredibly kind and generous and loving, and things have happened to us that have taken us away from that.
Yeah.
So a lot of this work is about going back to that, realizing that we are one human family living on one globe, one global village, and that we deserve to love each other and care for one another and acknowledge that just as I want my children to be educated and to have the best education possible, that other parents want the same thing too. And some of them have to work 2 and 3 jobs and still can barely afford a place to live. And how they're no less deserving of having the best in life than I am. So it's really looking at this having more of a holistic view about the members of the human family and how we can choose to be kind. We can choose to be loving. We can choose to be generous. Those are all choices that we make on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I think that you so beautifully express the need to go through the internal process that is so loud that even in the silence of not saying anything, it can be so loud and so painful. And with the sensation of feeling of wanting to explode and not knowing where or how to elegantly express all that stuff, that is inside. Um, you say that we can't be forced to heal, that healing is something we come to when we're ready, when life has thrown enough at us. We have no choice but to change. Do you think that the murder of George Floyd was the universe, in a sense, looking and saying, okay, humanity, you're now ready to heal and change? Do you think it was the way of us being thrown into no choice change? The change is going to happen now, whether you're ready to wake up to it or not.
Yeah, I think it had a tremendous spiritual awakening on people all over the planet, really all over the planet. Because I think people have heard about these murders, and they sometimes watch a TV show where they feel like, oh, it's not real. But there it was right in your face and it was real. The
Mhm.
other thing about that is that it took a very courageous 17-year-old to put that video on YouTube. Had she not done that,
Yes.
we would not have known about
I
George.
It would have gone away like all the others. Yeah.
Absolutely. Which again is to remind people that that stuff is still happening. It's just not on the news every night anymore. Okay? It
Mhm,
hasn't stopped, which is why we can't stop learning and becoming more
mhm.
aware and saying no to that kind of violence, right? It's just really, really important. And again, it's I really believe life is a journey of becoming conscious, of being awake and aware. I joke with people when, I always remind them that anyone who is anti woke is pro sleep. And if somebody needs you to sleep, you better be asking why they want you to be asleep. Okay. Like you need to be asking, why do you need me to be asleep? Right.
Yeah.
Very important. But it's this awareness that we as a member of the human family have a responsibility not just to ourselves but also to each other in the way that we interact with one another and the choices that we make on a regular basis about how we interact with one another.
Yeah, knowing what we don't know, you say, is so important for us to know what we don't know, and that's, for me, where my responsibility, okay, I need to know something. So the awakening to, uh-oh, I need to know something. There's pain. I need to know something. Just like a shoulder, it's calling my attention, whether it's from the outside or inside, it wants my attention, this thing. And then being able to discern, okay, well, I know this, but I don't have a clue how to heal it. Then that's where the work goes, to go out and find people like yourself, guides, to fill in the missing information. Um, in the case of healing and replacing forced healing, what can you offer to someone who says, "I don't wanna force myself this, but I know I need to heal this. It's in me, I'm part of it." What's a good way to begin without forcing, or do we need to force? Sit down and do your homework, right?
Sometimes we do need to force people to do the homework. Absolutely. But for the
Okay.
most part, if you have enough awareness to go, I think I could benefit from understanding this. Again, people will do what what touches them, what they see as part of their lives, right? And so it's an important understanding that race literacy work is about learning not just about your spiritual siblings that are on the planet, right? But also learning about yourself. I
Mhm.
mean, I can't tell you how many people have gone through some of these programs that I do, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I understand my husband better. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
I had no idea that I was blah, blah, blah," because it's all connected. We
Mhm.
have been very well trained in segregation. So segregation thinking, segregation feelings, you separate your body from your mind, you separate your head from your but like it's all these various forms of segregation. We're so good at it, we don't realize that we're doing it. But in reality, everything functions as one, right? Our thoughts create feelings in our bodies that make us feel neutral, good or bad. It's like, and you change your the way you're talking to yourself, you breathe openly and you start to feel better, right? And so, understanding that you do this work not for those people over there, but for you,
Yeah.
because as an individual, you have been indoctrinated into something that you never said yes to. You never said yes to it. We're born into this stuff, you know? And none of us went and signed on the dotted line and said, "Oh, I think I wanna be a racist." You know? We said, "I think so." You know? But understanding that the conditioning has turned us into this thing, whatever this thing is, right? But we can do the work to decondition ourselves, right? To be different around this very important topic because we are raising families, we're members of communities, we're leaders, we are people who hire other people, and all those things are being affected by the disconnect. And
Yeah.
so the work is about unity and oneness. That's really what the work is. And what often happens is that that work allows us to become one with ourselves, to be more self caring, more self loving, more self nurturing. That's really ultimately what happens when we awaken to the fact that we have been conditioned. Do you have any idea how much energy is going to this stuff, whether we're conscious of it or not? It's a
Yeah.
lot of energy that you could be using to heal your body, heal your mind, heal your neighborhood. Like you could be using this amazing power and energy, but it's going out to this thing that people created hundreds of years ago and continues to affect us even today. So we need to
Yeah.
pull our power back.
It was it I find it interesting that it takes it can take the personal healing and a level of forgiveness, not forgetting, a level of forgiveness to then open up to being in relationship with something of the opposite. Whether it's black people, white people, coming together to connect in that what you call the humanity, that one race of humanity. And it's been very painful to me to watch what I see as that is the intent, that is the desire. Yet in the process of that, the actual further separation, which I wonder is that part of the healing process for people to say, no, this is our group. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so when people are confronted with something new and healing and transformation, particularly, very often they go through a healing crisis. Whether they say yes or no, they go through that healing crisis. If they say no, they go through the healing crisis and decide to double down and I'm not going to change. This is who I am. This is it. Take it or leave it. Right. And then there are those who say, I want to change, but things get worse before they get better because now all of a sudden it's like, buying that red convertible. You never saw that kind of red convertible on the road before. You have one now. Everybody seems like everybody has one because
Right.
what happens is your consciousness has awakened to that new car, that specific car. And now you see it everywhere where it's always been there. You just couldn't see it before because your conditioning didn't you weren't at the frequency where you could see it. right? So what happens is, you're vibrating at a specific frequency where you have been conditioned to be, to function from racism and segregation and all these kinds of things, right? Now somebody comes to you and offers you a new possibility, and let's say, there will be those who will say no, but let's say you say yes to this new possibility. What happens is now you've awakened to a whole new consciousness in a whole new field of frequency, and things that you didn't see before, now you can see it. And very often what happens, particularly in the white community, is as people begin to awaken to this work, they start to get very angry at other white people who don't get it. Very angry, you know, and they, and then they wanna control them. They wanna control what they say, how they say it, when they say it, and it becomes this game of control. Well, if you're trying to control other people, you're not doing your own work,
Yeah.
because your own work takes you here. And when you're here, you're not trying to control other people.
Well, I think
So
that's what, when we initially, after the murder of George Floyd, like other companies, it was like, oh, we've got to get, a DEI committee. We've got to figure this out. And it felt like an imposter to me.
mm,
And I think it felt like an imposter to me for that very reason. You have got to do your own work. It
mm,
can't put a committee of people together and write out laws and rules and regulations, and this is what we're gonna do, and guess what? All of a sudden, Nia's gonna be attracting more Black people and more people of color. Well, it's not.
mhm,
We're in 41 countries where we don't have a large Black population. Maybe it's the music. I can't tell you other than maybe it's because it was created by, affluent white women,
mm, mhm.
all of those things are reasons why, and I just it's that feeling, you can't force the healing. I
Exactly.
don't think you just can't.
You really can't. You have to wait. It's the old, "When the student is ready, the teacher will appear." You know,
Exactly.
it's that whole thing of you have got to, when you come to it, you'll be able to do the work because you'll be ready. It's like me, all those years doing all this other stuff that I was doing, and resisting the work, right? Because I really was resisting it, no question about it, and consciously resisting it. Um, and then coming to a place where I realized this is my work. This is
Yeah,
my life's work. But I had to be ready to accept that, you know. And then the thing about that was that it also meant that I'm a Virgo, so like we don't know how to fake it. It's either real or it isn't, right? And so there's no way that I could do this work. Like I can't just show up to do a workshop I don't if I haven't had the experience, I don't understand it. I know what it feels like, tastes like, looks like, like for me, it's physician heal thyself, right? Which
yeah,
meant that while I was trying to teach other people, I was doing my own healing work. And that was really rough. It was really rough because it wasn't this, "Oh, I'm gonna teach y'all how to heal," It's like, I gotta heal me first, and then, but I'm so glad that I did it that way because I I don't have imposter syndrome,
right.
I've never had imposter syndrome because I'm either gonna do it or I'm not, and if I'm not, I'm not, but if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna go all the way through, and so having that um, groundedness to do this work is really important because I can't tell you how many people of all shades and colors, of all nationalities, do this work without having done their own work.
Right.
What happens is that they go into a space to do this and it makes things worse because it's not grounded in the reality of
Exactly.
this is painful, and this
Mhm.
is not about you, it's about me. That I'm the one that has caused pain, or I'm the one that has been traumatized by this or traumatized by that, and just really being honest about that my parents used the belt because the belt was used on them, and on and on and on, and you trace it back and you realize, oh, that's how they used to control enslaved people, like, you know what I mean? Like, all of these things that are part of that awakening and that realization, and then going back and being compassionate toward parents and people who came before us, and the stuff that they have done that's really wounded us in one form or another, and realizing somebody wounded them, and we
Yeah,
know that hurt people, you know? And so I think it allows us to be more compassionate and more willing to forgive, more willing to forgive. As you said,
yeah.
you may never forget, okay? But I always remind people that true forgiveness comes with a form of forgetting, because what happens is that it's no longer top of mind awareness, and it's no
Mhm.
longer running your life, you know? That's what happens when we're able to allow ourselves to go into that deeper place of forgiveness. And so at that level, what happens is it can no longer control you. You have power over your own life. You start to become more sovereign over your own life. You're not being party to the conditioning that the world is doing because it doesn't know any better, or because it's getting something from you and it needs for you to be conditioned so that you can follow the rules and you can be controlled, and all these kinds of, like, you really start to become sovereign over yourself. It is so powerful. That work is so worth doing, regardless of the color of our skin.
Cleaning
Oh,
a real deep cleaning of house, of one's consciousness. I find myself sometimes saying, "Is that my mom's thought or my thought?" "Where'd that come from?" Right? And then
exactly.
can I discern, is that something from socialization, right? Or is it something that I read, I learned, but
Mhm,
is it something that I can be proud of, that I want to own? Can I own this as a part of my personality, as my own thought, my own choice, my own decision? Can I own that? Can I stand behind that?
mhm,
Or do I doubt? I'm not sure about it, right? I want to be 100% sure when I share a thought, an attitude, a belief system, whatever. I'm doing this. I want to be as close to sure as I can. Now, I can get validation from outside. I always go, "Yeah, that's okay," but that's not the validation that I want. That gut feeling of this is right for me comes with this. That means I've got to do this. I've got to shut all of that out so that I don't get pulled and distracted.
mhm,
And certainly, as a leader of a movement art company, I have been pulled and have felt the distraction of, you should be doing this. And it goes back to, well, I should, but then it goes back to, but what are you doing? Right. And there's this funny kind of attitude that if if I do something, everybody else is going to feel good that it's happening. Right.
mhm, mhm,
Diversity, equity, inclusion is gonna happen as long as Debbie Rosa's leader of this corporation is making sure that they're doing it in the company and I'm part of that company, then everything's okay. It's like, "No,
mhm. Well, you
no,
find out very quickly, because the moment the company pulls out, people don't continue to do the work.
completely."
They don't conti if the company's not paying for it, I'm not doing it. And it's like, but this is about you.
Yeah.
And that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was gonna say, and it's interesting, we're always asking for feedback, right? So on the top of the list is, "What are you doing about this?" Right? And we will share, what we're doing about it, and then it's like, "Well, but what are you as an individual doing?" You know? Or, having somebody, "How come there aren't enough Black people in the classes?" We have a conversation, then I'll say, "Well," and even if it's a Black teacher, "How many Black students are in your class?" "None." And there's so many variables where somebody lives and I mean, just
Yeah.
and so I feel like we're in this time warp of no integration of left and right brain. It's either left or right. It's this separation of almost absolutely everything, and forgetting in some way that preparation to make lasting social change, right? It requires preparation,
Mhm.
requires strategic thinking, anticipating, looking around, and it requires a sustained practice and
Consistent.
activity. And you
Absolutely.
may feel like nothing's happening. I love it. George Leonard talks about that. You're on a plateau and you think nothing's happening. Trust me, it's happening.
Mm.
Right? Can we continue to climb up this mountain together and give a helping hand to somebody who needs it, or to push somebody who's doing it like me? I want to push you up to the top so you can pull everybody else up. Those kinds of things. And it has to begin for me learning to open our hearts and say, I'm sorry,
Yes,
you
that's
know?
huge. It's funny, every year, at least once a year, more often several times a year, I uncover and discover something about myself that may have hurt my children, who are adults, in one way or another, unintentionally.
Yeah.
And so I will write them a letter. I recently wrote one. I want to say it was probably about 2, 3 weeks ago. I wrote one to my children and I said, I am so sorry. I realized that, working through what I didn't even realize was trauma in my life may have caused you to hurt somehow, because I didn't know what I didn't know, but I know it now. And I want you to know it so that you don't continue to hurt over it. And here's what it is. And I detailed, the trauma and the blah, 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 blah. I got a note from my daughter, who's my oldest child. And she said, Mom, this is so helpful for me.
Mm.
She said, I just love this. I'm so grateful that you sent this to me. And then she said, more parents should be doing this. She said, this is why you're the best. I was
Oh,
like, thank you. That is so sweet. But it meant so much to her because obviously there was something going on either subconsciously or in her conscious mind that was related to something and she didn't know what it was related to. By getting that information, she was able to put that piece of the puzzle where it belongs,
yeah.
which allows you to then what that does is it frees you from the inside out. I just finished a 14-week program. I'm starting a 10-week program in a couple of weeks. Actually, April 30th of 2024, I'm starting another 10 weeks of coaching with folks. The growth was incredible in those 14 weeks, and people were saying, "I had no idea. I can now do X, Y, and Z, and now I feel blah, 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 and I see how this has transformed my life," because I think that when people become self-liberating, they become sovereign over their own lives. And you don't have to make them do anything. They show up because it's the next level for them.
Self-liberating, that is a responsibility, right? It's a practice. I love how you bring in the concept of children. Let's face it, when we are a human being in relationship with another human being, there's going to be some hurt.
Mhm.
There's going to be some trauma. It's just a messy business. None of us has the perfect guidebook of how to do this, right? We're learning along the way, hopefully, by looking back at the past, by being more present in the present. We can create a better future by raising our consciousness, by becoming aware of resonance, becoming aware of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual coherence, alignment, and by taking responsibility first to do our own work. to heal our own heart, to open our own heart. But then it's not just about that close circle of the ones that we love and our children, but also as people who serve others in a business, whether it's a coach or a psychologist, whatever it may be, that outside circle that we can help heal. And in the process, sometimes in that healing, it can awaken in people things maybe they're not ready to look at. And so the pain that they may experience or the suffering can be projected out on, oh, you did this to me, when in reality it's like the oyster, the little sand in the oyster shell. And I think you said it so beautifully. When the student's ready, the teacher shows up. I truly believe that. And yet, as someone who has absolutely been told that I made someone hurt or inflicted, discomfort, there is there's a place as a healer, I think. I don't know if you feel this, that we have to stand and once again and say, I'm doing this with completely with the intention to do no harm, yet I realize that it might, that it
Ab
might.
absolutely.
And, I just, you do it right. I want to say that, Milagros, and I want to thank you so much for
That's so sweet. I
participating in this conversation. And where can people find out more about you, where they can sign up for your courses and really go on a very enriching and deeply personal and meaningful, important conversation with themselves?
Yeah, so I do a monthly race literacy lunch and learn. Is the first Monday of the month at 12 noon Eastern. Unless it's a holiday, that is the following week, but you'll find it the first week. You can visit my website if you want to get more information on that, which is www.milagrosphillips.com. So it's my name, Milagros, Phillips, Phillips, .com. You can write to me at info@milagrosphillips.com if you have any questions or want some more information. The upcoming program that starts in April of 2024, the 10-week program. Um, if you want more information on that, you will have to email me at info@milagrosphillips.com because that's a private program. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from all of you
And
as
your books, where can they get your books?
right. Oh, yes, you can get my books on Amazon. Uh, my last book is Cracking the Healer's Code: A Prescription for Healing Racism and Finding Wholeness. And there's also a companion journal so that as you learn the lessons and you start to peel away the layers, you can keep track of your progress in the journal. And that's available on Amazon. I wrote a book called Speaking Race in Healthcare. Very
Yes.
important that people understand how to have those conversations with their healthcare providers, as well as 11 reasons to become race literate and 8 essentials to a race conversation. So all of those books are on Amazon, and you can also find information on that on my website.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you for this wonderful conversation. Life on a continuum, one moment to the next and to the next. Connection. We
Mhm.
are all connected. Being able to sit in our listening space, to listen and feel the resonance, to hold space for someone else's story is so, so very important. My question, I think, is always what can I do today to become part of a powerful collective voice? Not just my own voice, but what can I do today to become part of a powerful collective voice in helping change the world? There are lots of things that we can do. And I think it begins, as I said, with taking responsibility for your own story, for your own body, for your own life, for your own relationship with racism, and out of a desire to help heal yourself and help transform humanity into something kinder and more loving. That's my wish. Thanks so much for joining me. And again, if you want to find out more about our guest, Milagros Phillips, you can email info@milagrosphillips.com. And you can also go to www.milagrosphillips.com. Check out her books, they are fantastic. To find out more about me, you can visit my new online magazine, Awakening Body and Life, at debbierosas.com. You can browse, you can read, and you can sign up to receive inspiring body and life healing wisdom every week. You can also find me on Facebook by searching Nia, on Twitter and Instagram at Nia Technique, and on Nia Now. And go to Nia On Demand. You can get 2 weeks free, and you can explore all kinds of movement meditations and podcasts. Remember, it's important to get into the conversation, to get into your own body, to live your experience and make a difference in the world. I'll see you next week, and thanks so much for joining me.